Welcome to the very first episode of Core Conversations, coming to you from Studio 1887 here at the Coast Guard Academy. I'm First Class Aislinn Murray.
And I'm First Class Pandorf. We're excited to kick off the podcast where we sit down with Coast Guard Academy alum to talk about the moments that shape who we become as leaders, officers, and most importantly, people.
This show is all about those defining experiences, the ones that stay with you long after you leave Chase Hall, and how they connect to the cadet experience today.
And we couldn't think of a better guest to start with.
Today, we're joined by Commander Jeannie Greene, Cutterman, Civil Engineer, Commanding Officer, and now Chief of the Nautical Science Department here at the Coast Guard Academy.
Commander Greene brings an incredible perspective, from leading at sea to navigating personnel and professional challenges, to what it really means to take care of your crew.
Before we dive into the conversation, we want to take a minute as cadets to reflect on what stood out to us and how it connects to life here and now.
So Aislinn, thinking about the episode, what was one moment or story from Commander Greene that really stuck with you?
I loved this episode so much. Commander Greene is amazing. She brings so much energy, and it was really cool to hear her story. The biggest thing that stuck out to me from recording with Commander Greene was hearing her sister's story. Commander Greene really had to navigate so much. She was navigating grief in many different aspects of her life, which we'll hear in the podcast, but she also was navigating being a mom, being a wife, having a family while being a commanding officer, and so many different things. It was so resilient of Commander Greene to continue showing up for her people, continue showing up for her family, and to continue showing up for herself despite going through such trauma and significant life events.
What really stuck out for me was that she put a huge emphasis on actually taking care of your people, putting your people first. She said that leadership isn't just about authority. It's about building trust through consistency and showing up for your team. At the Academy, we're constantly in positions where we're responsible for others. It's easy to focus on our own performance and the standards. Her perspective showed that people always come first, no matter the situation or outcome. How do you think it might shape the kind of leader you want to be in the fleet?
I think the most important thing is when you ask someone how they're doing to really listen. And I feel like when we're in this environment here as cadets, that it's such a busy life and we're constantly in go, go, go mode that it can be difficult when you're passing someone in the hallway to be like, hey, what's up? Hey, how are you? But really taking that extra second to listen to their response and really show that active listening that you care about them.
Commander Greene makes me want to be the leader that people trust, someone who is steady, always approachable, and genuinely invested in their team and the success of their members.
Definitely. We are so excited to have you here today listening to Commander Greene. So let's get into the episode.
Before we begin this episode, we want to take a moment to acknowledge that this conversation includes discussion of sensitive topics, including grief, traumatic loss, serious injury, organ donation, and suicide. We encourage you to take a pause or skip ahead if needed. These topics begin around the 37-minute mark and run through minute 58. If you or someone you know may need support, please consider reaching out to a trusted resource or professional. We will post a resource link in the podcast notes.
Welcome to Core Conversations. Today we're joined by Commander Jeannie Greene, Cutterman, Commanding Officer, Civil Engineer, Wellness Advocate, and now Chief of the Nautical Science Department here at the Coast Guard Academy. This podcast is all about core moments, the experiences that shape who we become as leaders, officers, and people. Ma'am, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
This is so cool that you guys are doing this. And I'm like honored to be, one of the people that gets to partake.
We're so excited. So before we dive in, we start every episode with a challenge. In 1 minute, can you give us your elevator speech?
I'm a cutterman and a civil engineer. I've also gotten to become a wife and a mom to real kids and a mom to my sea children as well. So just a collector of shipmates and experiences. And my float time has mostly been buoy tending and ice breaking. And I think that being part of a crew is probably the thing that has defined my life. I didn't even think about that till now, but my whole life. And I think the concept of that extends to the alumni and the family that is. That we're all a part of, that spans generations. And so that's my speech. I'm a member of your crew.
That's amazing. We are so glad you're here. We have so many things we want to talk about.
Buckle up.
So to start, bring us back to your high school days. What brought you to the academy? What started Commander Jeannie Greene?
So growing up like in the country kid, small classes, there was 43 of us, I think, in my graduating class. And I think the Coast Guard nexus, the cred goes to my big sister, Molly. She grew up very, very serious kid, very driven, very hardworking, just destined for the military. And so she was very interested in military academies. So she filled out, we used to have things called paper and pens, and we would fill things out.
Never heard of it.
And send them in the mail, and things would come through the mail. And that's how we got our information. So this folder of information came in the mail with a straight up pirate ship on the front of it. This big 300-foot long pirate ship, and it said Coast Guard on it. And remember, we're like running around cornfields and building potato guns. And she sees that and was like, I don't know what that is, but if I get to sail on that ship, I'm in. She applied to the Coast Guard Academy and she got in.
Wow.
She flew off to some place called Connecticut and we didn't hear from her. And then she, emerged from Swab Summer and she was a cadet. And, she would, at the time, Chase Hall only had payphones. So she'd go to one of the payphones and we'd get calls from her and we started to learn more about this place. I was definitely not, and arguably still not, cut out for the military. And I was very interested in going to art school. And so the thought of what she was doing was cool, but definitely not for me. And then she told me like, hey, there's this cool thing called AIM. You should apply to it. It'll look good on your resume. And then you can come see where I go to school. And I was like, absolutely not. No way am I doing that. And then I did. So I came to AIM and I got my butt kicked and ran around with flag and learned what the Coast Guard did. And just the vibe, it was like my initial immersion into doing things as a team, even just learning to march. I know that sounds silly to many of us, but that was that initial, like when you are walking in time with another person, it does something to you. And it hit me like that Kool-Aid, that hit me and it still hits. And then I was all in. I wanted to go to any military academy. So I went down that process and I did end up with some options, but I just couldn't forget that little nautically themed college in New England. And it was also very appealing that I had family there, you
Right.
know, being from so far away. I think that was really cool. The idea of getting to go do this with my big sister. So yeah, so I applied and I got in and I came. Here we are.
That is amazing. Can you walk us through how you decided your billet? I'm a firstie picking my billets, all my classmates. We just met with OPM this week.
Yeah.
So it's pretty stressful. It's a lot of change. It's a lot of unknown. So can you walk us through how you came to that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. So back to my sister Molly. She was on the original Mackinac, which was decommissioned in 2006. But when she was on it between 2003 and 2005, they were in the process of replacing her with a new ship. I think everybody now knows that it was replaced by a icebreaker buoy tender. At that time, like information wasn't as readily available as it is now. And so, you couldn't just hop online and figure these things out. And so she's like, hey, dum-dum, the new Mackinac is going to be a buoy tender. And at the time, Sheboygan, Michigan was not necessarily where ensigns wanted to go. They wanted to go to Key West, Alameda, maybe Seattle.
Right.
Sheboygan wasn't really up there. And she was like, this is your way in. So I put the new Mackinac at the top of my list and I got to go there with my classmate.
Wow.
Matt. Yeah.
Did you guys commission Mackinac?
Yes, I'm a plank owner, which is, a member of the first crew. All the basic things that you do when you report to a ship, like draw the fire main. Couldn't do it. Fire main wasn't finished at that point. It's just, it was an interesting experience.
Wow.
And then also to this day still, Mackinac is the only U.S. military vessel that has the propulsion system that it does. So not only was I new at all of it, but the whole crew was learning this brand new platform. And as your research may have indicated, we messed up pretty early on by running the ship into the break wall. Wild experience with just, incredible lessons, incredible hardship. As the plank owner crew, we felt absolutely like we had failed the Coast Guard. We had this love for the ship that we had breathed life into. That's what a crew does. And the fact that we had damaged it was horrible.
Do you think that was your first, okay, this just got real moment?
I think that was. And there's a lot more I know now about how things work, procedures when something bad happens, the investigations that happen. the way that we find out the facts at the time, it was heartbreaking because we saw our captain that we loved have to get relieved of command.
Right.
I think I was the navigation evaluator on the bridge when it happened.
Wow.
And to look up and see right before we hit to see my captain say on the bridge, "This is captain, I have the deck and the con." It was this immediate, like, that is what a captain does, is they do everything they can to keep the crew safe, but when all hell breaks loose, they take responsibility for it.
Right.
And I do think that was something that has weighed into my own career since then. So I think I didn't know then that was like pivotal, but
yeah,
I think it was. Thank you for asking that.
Do you think if you could go back and talk to your younger self, would you do anything different? Would you say anything different in that moment?
I remember my nav eval reports from then. We were right of track and opening, and I continued to give the report. I think now I should have been like, "You're right of track, get left, get left, get left, get left." I think I because I had no idea that was going to result in us being right of track means
right.
And I do think that was a lesson that the Coast Guard may have learned.
What a unique experience.
Yes.
So after that experience, were you set on going to float your second tour?
I was from day one on Mackinac, like aggressively included in everything. It was amazing. I have always been a bit of a jokester. My sister, very serious, very like meant for this, at least in my stereotypical mind. I know now that we're all meant for this if we want it, but
Definitely.
I was like jokester, liked high five, have fun, laugh. And they loved me for that on that ship, and they treated me like I could be myself. And so I think that incredibly positive experience on a ship, even going through what we did, I just loved that. Back to being part of a crew. So that was my next version of that. Really being part of the crew. Being a junior officer, you get to do collateral duties, which most of the time are actually helping people, helping the crew. And then it just creates that bond, that family. So I love that. Wanted to do more of that. Icebreaking was cool. I really liked the buoy tending. And so I put in for buoy tenders, and I got to go be operations officer on Juniper in Newport, Rhode Island.
So why do you think you put in for like those, were they XO jobs on patrol boats? Why do you think you put in for those as well as the ops jobs on the buoy tender?
I think because my command believed in me and made me feel like I could be in a position of leadership. And I suspect we all have doubts about our abilities. When you have your captain tell you something, you generally believe it. And he was telling me in many different ways that I could do that. And it was fun. Being on a bridge of a ship is fun. Standing there like this and giving helm commands is fun. But being the con in the deck, it is fun. And I think I liked that just, leadership that appealed to me. But buoys really appealed to me.
Was there a specific case or moment when you were an operations officer where you felt like responsibility really hit you? I mean, you were a JO on Mackinac. You had such a unique experience that many officers don't experience. When you shifted to an operations officer, I was on a buoy tender this summer, Coast Guard Cutter Hickory. I know it's close to your heart. Yes. And I had so much respect for my operations officer. It was an LTJG, and I felt like he knew everything. Anytime someone had a question, they went to ops. Yeah. So do you feel that you had a moment where responsibility hit and you're like, all right, I'm doing this?
When you graduate, you're going to walk aboard your first unit, and then you're not even going to know where your room is. And then 1 year later, you're going to be pulling the new JOs aboard, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I know all this. So for your ops this last summer, it came with time probably. But I do think that position, a 225 is a small crew. There's like 40, 45, depending on which unit. Ops is a department head amongst two warrants. So the engineer officer is a warrant, bosun's a warrant, and then you're a JG, and JOs thrive off of mentorship from especially senior enlisted, especially warrants that have gone up through the ranks, and they are just, the know-alls. And to be like a department head with them, it's like, having your two boat parents. And I got to benefit from that. There's also points of friction too, because you are so junior in your career. So generally, ops is standing a lot more in port duty, and ops is coordinating a lot of stuff that the warrants they don't have to do that anymore because they've checked all those boxes probably decades ago. So I had a great relationship with my command on Mackinac. Very different personality from my command on Juniper. And I learned a lot from that. And I initially felt like I wasn't meeting the expectation of my command. I felt like I couldn't get it right. I felt like I was constantly trying to change what I was doing to make sure that my CO was happy. I know now that He was just a different personality than I was. And that was a very big learning thing. At the end of that tour, I felt like I really knew how a bridge team should work. My captain was amazing at training us up to have really good nav eval, really good shipping, really good commands, just all the basic things, and then have that really great communication on the bridge where you could stand back and be the con and be like bop, 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 bop. And on a 225, I think that is really fun.
You mentioned a shift between your first command on Mackinac and then when
Mhm.
you went to your ops tour. How much of that do you think was you're now a department head, or that it was just like new command, I have to learn how to operate under a new captain, new XO?
Probably a combo. I got off on a real bad foot with one of the chiefs in the chief's mess. Isha Wisniewski. She was this, still is. She's awesome. MKC. I'd never seen a female MKC before. And I know now that through her career, she had to be the most professional, locked on. She was a female engineer. It was very important to her to be, I guess, classically professional, to have that demeanor, carry yourself a certain way. And when I rolled on board, all high fives, giggles, and, laughter, I think it was, I hadn't yet shown her that I was serious about my work and that I had a desire to do a good job. We absolutely figured each other out, but I think that was probably a similar tone with my CO, whereas I think my personality was appreciated and maybe even celebrated on Mackinac. It was not on Juniper, at least right away. And I do think now we know that it takes all types, and that, if you are smiling and laughing, that doesn't mean that you aren't going to absolutely kick butt at your job. But I will say on Juniper, like I learned a lot about people. And I think that concept of we are each different. And that can, in some ways, you can accidentally in some ways label people as, well, this person is, not professional. Know now for a fact that your personality does not in any way indicate your professionalism. But that's something that I try to be extremely aware of just from that experience.
Definitely.
Which was probably more valuable than any of the cutter stuff. It's just that like view of people,
Right.
which I think you really get on ships.
It's such a good point. You have to see people work. You can't just meet them, and it's like the classic, you can't judge a book by its cover, et cetera. Like once you get underway, then you get to see how people work, and then you understand a lot more about them, and you can understand why someone might seem jokey or clownish or whatever, and that might just be their personality. But when you get underway, and it's time to lower the boat, do the mission, they're serious and all business, and they can get it done, and they can also come back and smile and laugh and high five.
Totally. Because you should, because it's amazing.
Yeah,
definitely.
Should be happy. It's fun.
I love that personality. I love that you have a bright, bubbly personality. I've been told my whole life I was very much like that. My entire life.
Still are, I can tell.
I was very much like that. And I was always told, like, how are you always smiling? Like, not everything's that happy. And I think it's really awesome to hear a commander, someone who's been through so much, really say that, like, be who you are, be yourself, just show up as you are.
Yes.
And I think that's amazing.
Because we need all of us. Yes, if you want to smile, smile. And then also if you don't, that's fine too.
Right.
Smile your amount.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, we need all of us. Youthful coasties bring, whether it's new recruits, brand new non-rates that have just graduated boot camp, whether it's brand new ensigns, whether it's cadets, you guys bring this new energy. And it's not just because of smiles and laughs. It's because of just who you are. And I do think that people your age know this more. You know what you just said. You know that you guys should be yourselves. And I think in many ways you've taught the older generation that. And I've gotten to witness that. Thank you.
That's awesome. So shifting gears a little bit, a big talk, especially with OPM here this week, has been, do we do grad school? Can you walk us through your decision? I know when we were going to class yesterday, you said, that's the man who sent me to grad school.
Yep.
So can you walk us through that?
Yes. Well, so I think I knew that I absolutely wanted to go on more ships in the future, but my captain recommended that I at least apply to grad school. And I kind of did, when my sister recommended AIM, I was kind of like, whatever. I kind of felt that way too. I was like, but I got to do what my captain tells me to do.
Right.
Because, that's the dude. Like, he's my advisor. Like, he's my own, detailer. Like, I need to do what he says. And I was like, he hasn't seen my transcript, so he doesn't know that I'm not going to get grad school. Because I just did not see myself as someone who would get selected for it just because I have my academic mediocrity. And so my CO had recommended ocean engineering. I literally did not know what that was, but I was like, cool, sounds sounds neato. I was a civil engineer. So I had put my ocean engineering was in all of my OERs. I know this sounds insane that I had that in my OERs and I didn't even really know what it was. But so the year that I applied for ocean engineering, only 2 people in the entire Coast Guard did. I think grad school is really cool. It is amazing that the Coast Guard gives us these opportunities to be a full-time student. And if you can do it, and if it fits with your career path, you totally should. I felt like when I went to grad school, it did put me into a tight squeeze with making my next afloat window. However, I got so much support from the whole Coast Guard to get back afloat. If you are like me and you have doubts about your ability to do it, let me be a lesson to you that anyone can do it.
I think you made a lot of like really excellent points about the grad school process through there. And one of them that we talk about all the time here, because as you know, as an instructor here, everybody wants to talk about their future or 5 years out or 10 years out.
Absolutely.
But for you, noting that like it was in your OER for multiple years, I think, you know, it wasn't necessarily a spur of the moment thing to apply to grad school, right? You had thought it out. And I am curious how you planned that follow on with wanting to go back afloat. Like, did you have a required follow on tour? Did you know where you were going to go after? And then who was giving you advice on like, hey, I need to try to cut this short to get back underway so that I can make the next pay grade?
Great question. So starting to look at the math. So my grad program was a full 2 years, which meant that I could expect a full 4-year payback. And that really means you don't have much of a say, but the Coast Guard's going to find a way to make good on that degree that they just gave you. So my payback was at a civil engineering unit, expected full 4 years. Day 1 of reporting aboard, when I got to meet my new captain, I laid it all out there. I said, I hope to earn your support to short tour by a year because I'm anticipating a promotion window and I'd like to go back to sea. And I, from him and from all future COs I've ever had, have been totally hyped on that. And I didn't really realize that. I kind of expected the different Coast Guard communities to be a little bit more, hoardy with us, but it was like rad. Yes, we will try to do that. And so then that kind of gave me an initial bit of confidence that I was going to get the opportunity to do that. And then when the time came, they supported me to throw my name in the hat to screen for command, which I did not do, but they still let me go, which is pretty cool. Well, I screened for 140-foot icebreakers. Did not get one. I got offered XO of a 225, which I was like, heck yeah. And my command was there for me, and they said, bye, get you back to the sea. And I had support from I forgot to tell you guys, I got married along the way, had a baby in Cleveland too. Amazing. So at that point, had a husband and a little 1-year-old that were also supportive of that.
Yes, we did not talk about what I always refer to as like the secret best career path in the Coast Guard, civil engineering units. Yeah. So what did you do in Cleveland? I know that you just talked to OPM, and I'm sure they told you a little about CEUs if you asked, but I think writ large, many people in the fleet do not know what happens at a CEU, how you get to a CEU, and who is at a CEU.
Totally. Imagine, if you will, my joke is that I call CEUs casual engineering units. I'm just kidding. But like totally different environment than a ship. It is so Cleveland is the biggest one. So I report aboard, and it is just a big office, cubicles filled with amazing engineers that have been doing it their whole life. Mostly civilians. I feel like our civilians are the absolute like steady force that keeps the Coast Guard going, and CEUs are filled with them. Architects, civil engineers, electrical engineers, ocean engineers, and they are doing designs and they're executing projects for Coast Guard infrastructure. So the entryway for most of the outside Coast Guard to a civil engineer unit is a facility asset manager. So I got to be one of those, which really was like a hotline of like, hi, this is, Lieutenant Greene. What can I help you with? And I had my little portfolio of units that I was like their go-to, and I could connect them with the part of the civil engineering unit that was either working on their construction or could give them some funding for a smaller unit-led project, or could, help them try to put a bigger project on the Coast Guard's backlog for funding. So that was really, really cool. Also, the transition between a ship and a CEU is hard in many ways because on a ship, it's very clear what your progress is. I got from point A to point B. We worked 12 buoys. We freed that ship from the ice. At a CEU, some of these endeavors can take years. Some of them can take careers. And so the pace of just because of the length of, from prioritizing a project to executing it can take years. And so I think that was a big adjustment. Also at, some of these units, especially in civil engineering, you are confronted with, this really hard reality that we don't have enough money for the things that we need. And so I would get calls from, people whose peers were falling in the water. And it was like a little bit of a humbling thing to sort of be the bearer of a lot of bad news in addition to some cool things too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you said about the transition. And I made a similar transition going from cutters to an office. I went to headquarters.
Yeah.
But I think anyone going from that high op tempo unit and then to either grad school or then eventually to their first staff unit where you walk in and you see the cubicle farm and you see all these people and you have to figure out like, okay, I don't have this one tangible goal that we're working on today. I have these long-term goals or I have these kind of amorphous goals that I need to try to make progress on.
Oh, yeah.
Is such a difficult transition. And I also love they talked about meeting the civilian workforce for the first time because until you do that first real staff tour, you have no idea what they do. You have no idea how important they are.
Yeah.
And you have no idea how to work with them. And you have to learn all of those things.
Yeah. Right. And like, they're amazing. These are amazing people that, I roll around with, my like little outfit on, like bam, 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 all my awards and stuff. And they're just getting it done. They're just back there getting it done. And I feel like this is true to all. They're the foundation. And also at CEU Cleveland, there was this environment of fun. And it was there was always some sort of office shenanigans happening, pranks in games, contests, morale events. They know how to have fun. They still do. I think they're known for that.
Wow.
And that was an amazing environment for me to have kids in. So I got to have my first son there, and it was in no way did I or my position justify getting my own office. In no way. But they put me in one because they knew that I was going to have a baby. They wanted me to have a private space where I could pump my breast milk during work. And it was just these things. I didn't have to ask for any of that. It was just the office was like, let's make this an incredible environment for this person. Let's help this new mom out. And I'm gonna cry because I was so grateful for that. They showed me how to do that.
Wow.
And I feel like that is more common now, but CEU Cleveland had that on lock, back in 2008. So awesome.
That is amazing.
Way ahead of the game.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
Wow.
I also think it was a really great fit with my afloat career as well. This became a trend. At every CEU I went to, I had a child. It was only 2 of them. But again, it was a really good, stable work life in order to go through the process of having a kid.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
You're getting ready to leave Cleveland. You know you're going to be an XO. Does your mindset change as you're going to that next unit? Because now you are not, the deck watch officer. You are not a department head. You are the big bad XO.
Yeah.
What did you do to get ready? Did you do anything to get ready? How did your life change once you became that?
I didn't think too much about it, and that kicked me in the butt. I was excited to go to buoy tender. So at that point, I felt confident on the WLB, the Seagoing Buoy Tender 225, felt confident on that ship. Totally new area, Southeast Alaska, super narrow waterways, current. I hadn't dealt with like real high current yet. I hadn't dealt with sheer rock walls, and there's 5 knots through it and you got to get that buoy, within 30 minutes. I hadn't dealt with that. So it was like a step up in my foundation of ship handling. My jokester, people pleaser-y self felt nervous about being an XO, but I also felt like, I could do administrative things. I love working with a crew. So I felt like that was going to be a good fit. What I was not prepared for was the getting used to the type of mom that I was going to be. So I started getting like really upset about, really nothing that should have upset me. And I thought that I was just a stressed out XO, but about 30 minutes of therapy and the therapist was like, oh, you're mourning the loss of the mother that you had thought you were.
Wow.
Not to say that you aren't a mom, but so at that point, I had so much support, still do, from my husband. And he became, it was handing over the 1-year-old, because I was going to be the home and gone one. He was going to be the stable one at home. I was going to be less in the routine, and which is fine, and which I did get used to. But the getting used to that was a type of grief that I was not ready for.
Wow.
And I became much more like my dad in my family, not so much my mom. My mom was like the steady force at home where my dad was the traveler. So I was not prepared for that. I feel like all the parents in my Coast Guard life at that point hadn't really been, as open about how hard that is.
Yeah.
And I know it's not just for moms. I know dads struggle with this too, is like because I had chosen to go back afloat. That was something I aggressively chose. And in my mind, I had aggressively chosen to leave my child. That's how I felt at that point.
Yeah.
I know now that I'm worthy of the support that I've gotten, and my kids have gotten to see like an incredible man, be the stable force, and they've gotten to see a totally unhinged mother, which I think every child should see. And I bring that to the table. But that was a transition that just was harder than I anticipated. So yeah, it was
Right.
buried in, I'm just a busy XO. But that was something that I really had to process. It was a physical pain.
Bet. Yeah.
I did get used to it. I did adjust to it, and I'm so grateful. But I do think people need to know that it's not straightforward ever for any of us. For any of us managing a family and a career, even just a family, even just a career, managing all of it can be a mess. And I think at the beginning of that tour, I really had to change, and I really had to process that. And then through that tour, I learned how to do that a little bit better, not perfect. And then my captain treated me like I could be a captain, which I know I've been very I love ships and I was good, but I never saw myself as a CO until that tour. He just calmly started, hey, you got this, XO? I'm gonna go below. And I'm like, on the bridge, this is fake, Captain. And that was kind of our joke, is that I was fake. So he just, in just this super low key way, just kind of treated me like I could be captain. Yeah. And then just that crew and that ship being in Sitka, Alaska is an incredible place with just the most treasured experiences that I can imagine anyone having.
It's just so many beautiful points in there. And just to talk about the transition that you made is tremendous from CEU Cleveland. You're talking about just geographical transition first, right?
Yeah.
You go to Southeast Alaska. I lived in Ketchikan for 2 years.
So
that's
Yep.
a massive transition with family.
Yeah.
Right. And then now you're going from CEU, mom, coming home every night, to underway, mom, not home every night.
Yeah.
In a new environment. And Sitka it's remote. You're far from
Yes,
any
you are.
type of real kind of support system unless you have family in Sitka.
Didn't.
Right? Yeah. And you usually don't.
Yeah.
Usually don't. And then to get there, and I think I love the point too about your captain kind of backing off and letting you take some of the roles. I feel like
So
every good boss I've ever had as well has at some point, whether they were believed or, I think they all believed at some point, but they're ready to, hey, I'm going to back off, and maybe it's time for XO to make some decisions.
Yeah, and the humility of doing that. Being a ship captain, every minute of the time people are ringing bells for you and calling you things and hoisting flags for you. So for him to just kind of melt into the background a little bit, truly to put me in this position was so cool. So I'm so grateful to him.
And I totally empathize with that moment, because I remember when I was XO in Alaska in Ketchikan, and we would anchor at night a few times, and we would go into shore and do these things. And it was always fun. Being an Alaska sailor in Southeast Alaska is wonderful and
Yes.
the best. Everyone
Absolutely.
should go do it.
That is the takeaway of this podcast.
Should not be scared of it.
Go to Alaska.
But, towards, the second half of my tour, my captain starts to leave while we're at anchor, right? And you don't think that it'll affect you tremendously, but then just like you said on the bridge, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. Now I'm in charge of the ship.
Right. Because there's no
And
denying of the actions that you've
Yes.
just been doing it,
Yes,
and it almost is this subtle thing where you're like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you got that same experience.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I hadn't really
It
thought
is.
about it till you brought that up. And it just really makes my heart warm for that.
Who
you
was
know?
your captain?
Captain Diana Ferguson. Yes. And she was,
Shout out,
was,
Diana.
shout out to her for sure. And she was a lieutenant at the time. Now she's a commander. Was she classmates around the same time as you?
She was one or two. She's 2006 or 2007, and I'm horrified that I can't remember which one now. She's going to roast me for this. Don't publish this podcast.
She's still going strong in the cutter fleet, doing her thing, I'm sure.
She's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
So you talked about your captain really, putting this trust in you. Do you think that was your turning point and you were like, I want to be a CO one day?
He built this what if sort of.
Mhm.
But as I was leaving Maple, and this is weird to think about now because I loved that. It was such a great tour in all the different ways, and just formidable for my own development and my, being a mom. And so as I was leaving Maple, I was 20 weeks pregnant with baby number 2 walking off the brow, which per Coast Guard policy is as pregnant as you're allowed to be and still be underway. So the timing of that was incredible. I know that is not the case for many people who are having children. But as I was rolling off that brow, I really felt like this was incredible. There's no way I could ever replicate how good that was. It sounds insane. So I am closing my Afloat chapter, and I'm going to eagerly and gratefully be a civil engineer from here on out.
Wow.
You know, which I absolutely could have been. Like, you can have an entire civil engineering career, and it is great and fruitful and awesome. And I was ready to do that. As you might know, spoiler alert, that's not what happened.
This isn't what happened.
What happened?
Yeah,
So I even let my my NAV rules lapse. This is going to give people PTSD. If you don't take your exam, within 5 years, then you have to go back to the closed book test. I was fully
Wow.
at peace with not going afloat again. And then
because you went from there to Oakland.
I went from there back to another CEU.
Okay. And so
Amazing.
you had looked at like your 5-year plan from leaving the XO job and said, okay, this is my new plan. I'm going to be a civil engineer and I'm headed out to Oakland. And
Yes.
then I don't know what maybe the next tour will be, but like,
Yeah.
it's going to be on land.
Yeah, that was the plan. And then Captain John Mussman messed it all up. I was just minding my own business. I think I was over on, Base Alameda for a meeting or something. He asked me, he had been captain of a 225 called Hickory back in the day. And he, so he was Alaska 8-ton sailor. And as you know, we all kind of get to know each other. We have our own little sub families in the Coast Guard. And he was like, hey, when are you getting back afloat again? And I was like, well, actually, sir, I've pretty much decided to, and then life slowed down when he asked me that. And I was like, oh no. Like him just asking me that made me like slap me across the face that like I absolutely had to go afloat again.
Wow.
So yeah, he like kind of messed me up and threw me through a whirl. And
Nothing scarier than running into an old Cutterman at a staff tour.
thank you.
There is nothing.
That is the quote of the day.
It's going to happen every time.
They gonna get you.
And they know.
Yes.
They know. And they're going
Yes.
to ask you that question and you're not going to have the answer that you want. You're probably not going to have the answer they want.
Yeah.
But then it's going to
Yeah.
get that bug in you again.
Oh, he
Yeah.
put that bug right in me. I went home like in a fret that night and I was like, Eric, I need to talk to you. And he's like, oh my gosh, what happened? And I'm like, I want to go float again. And he's like, what? I was like, I need to go back to sea. He's like, of course you do. He's like, I knew that. I knew you weren't done. Like my husband knew. He knew
Wow.
that. Yeah. So also in 2019, my sister, the one who got me here, she was involved in a horribly traumatic motorcycle accident. At the time she was stationed in headquarters. And so this happened on a Monday and I just kind of put my clothes on and I got in the train and I was headed into work at CEU and Captain Osgood was like, Jeannie, I need you to turn around, take the other train home and book a flight because I was just in this daze and I was going to go into work and he was very like, go be with your family. That whole unit, the whole Coast Guard, was like, go be with your family. And so this horrendous tragedy happened and, that was another version of all the Coast Guard trying to care and, being a crew for me. And so it was also around the same time that a Coast Guard cutter Hickory, the one that Captain Mussman had been on, they had their own tragedy. And so in January of that year of 2019, their bosun was killed in a buoy yard accident.
Right.
And so it was a lot of really intense things happening. And, it was, Mussman putting the bug in me to go back afloat. It was the ship that ended up having an off-season need for a commanding officer in Alaska on a buoy tender and all these things that I've told you about, like built into this scenario where a very traumatized me got to go be with a crew that understood
Absolutely.
trauma. And that was kind of the way that time frame went. And I could talk for days about any part of that.
I do think that we should spend a little bit of time talking about your sister Molly and that specific time period in your life where you were in Oakland and then you're coming back and you have this terrible tragedy. And your sister was at headquarters at the time.
Yes.
So you're coming back to DC and like, how did you get through that? And then what did you kind of take away from all of that? Not that taking something away was the important part, but just you needed to then, like you said, take the CO job, move on with your life and lead people while you're going through all this. Like, how did that happen? How did you get there?
Wow. So Molly was at headquarters because she'd been relieved of command of a buoy tender of Hollyhock. And the details of that, I'll never know. And sadly, we weren't on speaking terms then. Again, whole other podcast, could talk for hours about that. But I think that was the foundation for my doubt to even go be with her then. That sounds horrible. But, after Captain Osgood was like, go to DC, you have to go. Accident happened on a Monday. My whole family started our journeys to DC. Molly was kept alive by a Coast Guard yeoman.
An incredible story.
Yes. Who, was on his way to work, and he kept her alive. And it's astonishing what he did. And, he gave her CPR for a very long time, which I have heard. I've never done it myself, but I've heard is just incredibly physical, demanding thing. And he did it. And so she was alive for the first responders, which, gave my family and I this ability to get there.
And I don't know if we had set the whole stage correctly, but right, she was riding a motorcycle, struck on the way to work. This Coast Guard yeoman who stopped and did this, on the side of the road?
Yes. Right. And everyone who's been to headquarters knows the intersection. It's Firth Sterling. And it's funny, I used to have all these details in my mind, and trauma brain has swept them away. But she was turning left, and you made a mistake and was hit on her right side by a car, which they think was going around 40 miles per hour. So she was very hurt. That was clear, and would probably not have made it if it wasn't for
the CPR.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're all on our way to get there. And, my parents come from Wyoming, little sister's coming from North Dakota, I'm coming from California. So just, and from the first second, as you guys know, Coastie was there. And through the whole thing, Coasties were there. My parents are from Wyoming, and they were flying into the heart of a big city. And my sister's classmates, class 2003, someone was at the airport to take my parents there. Someone was in my sister's ICU room the entire time. They stood watch.
Wow.
They stood up watch. That's what the Coast Guard did for my family and I. So, we're all arriving, and, at the time, in order to try to slow any sort of brain damage that Molly certainly had, they had put her into a hypothermic cooling state, and they were then bringing her back up to temperature in a controlled manner. And by Wednesday, sadly, they had enough information to know that she really had no meaningful brain activity. Molly was an incredibly organized person. I think from the moment she was that kid in Colorado, wanting to go to military academy, and she had very squared away and clear documentation about what she would want in life, and in death, which made it very easy for my poor traumatized mom to make the decisions that she needed to make, which was that Molly did not want to be kept on life support, but that she did want to be an organ donor. So keep in mind, the whole Coast Guard is tracking what's going on. My sister's classmates, my classmates, shipmates, everyone at Coast Guard headquarters, the commandant knew. The commandant came. Just an example, there was just hundreds of people who were there supporting and tracking what we were going through. And so on Wednesday, when we knew that unfortunately we're going to have to say goodbye to her, word was out that she was going to be an organ donor. And this is when I think the most amazing thing in the world happened, is that my classmate, class of 2005, swab summer shipmate, Matthew Brinkley, he and his wife had an incredibly difficult conversation, and they decided to be super courageous and ask me if my family would be willing to do a direct donation of one of Molly's kidneys. That was a wild thing for them to ask. They didn't want to do it. They felt super weird about it. But when they did, it was like this gift, that this immediate positive hope that Molly could help someone. And the thought of helping someone that we knew was immediately just amazing. And again, I guess I want everyone in the world to hear that. I hope no one goes through this. I know this is a hopefully rare, unique circumstance, but it was just such a kind thing that my family got to have, which was this opportunity. So there's a whole system of things that have to happen in order to safely get an organ, to where it needs to go. I don't think any of us thought that Molly's exact kidney was going to be a match for Matt's mom. But when you do a direct donation, it definitely moves someone up the list. Except they were a match. They were tissue type, blood, all the things, which again, I used to know all these details, and my trauma brain has swept them away. But my sister's kidney was gifted to Matt's mom.
Incredible.
Yes. And then on Friday is the day that we said goodbye to Molly. And they wheeled her away with hundreds of COSIs there with us, supporting us, saying goodbye to her, giving her an incredible honor in her death. And Saturday morning, I got to sit on Lynn's hospital bed and hold her hand, and she had Molly's in her. And Molly was like the strong, like baddie, and they plugged that kidney in and it like shot out, and like Lynn's life was changed. It was just like,
Wow.
it was just this incredible, incredible thing
Wow.
that I still can't believe happened.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was wild. That was and then trying to heal from losing her. Also now knowing that I never got to make amends with her.
Right.
Has been its own process, but I got to go be part of a crew that had been through it. And also, Molly had, before she got relieved, she was CO of a 225, and there I was as CO of a 225. And so it was like this perfectly tailored full immersion therapy of trying to heal up. I was in her boots, and I knew I was making some of the same decisions and actions that she had to. And it was like this connection sort of back to the start of the Coast Guard, which was her seeing that picture of Eagle and being like, sure, I'll go to New London, Connecticut. So I think that was an unforeseen, amazing, beautiful thing. And then also getting to be with a crew that knew when I was openly weeping in the gym that I was processing, and no one treated me like I was some crazy kook. They treated me like I was a human.
A human, absolutely.
And some of them had incredible trauma that was affecting their lives. And I hope that because I rolled in there, dragging my trauma around, I hope that made it, easier for them to get what they needed. So I hope that I was what they needed, because they were exactly what I needed as well.
It's like, again, your transitions throughout your career have just like never really been simple. It's always a little bit complicated. It's always difficult. And this one, especially because when you're getting ready to go be CO, you've been selected, you've had this lead up to being CO. I think for a lot of people, you have this idea of who you want to be as a captain. You have this time to plan and think, and you rely on all those memories you have of your great captains and things like that. And then you lose your sister. This crew is in a specific situation. So all of that stuff is now kind of like out the window. And
Absolutely.
I could see this setting up to not be a positive experience for you as a captain. Like, you're not going to get to be the CO that you dreamed and wanted to be. But maybe that didn't end up being the case, right? Because what happened from there?
I feel like in my life, the exact people that I need, even if I don't even realize it, they just like show up. So getting to do Coast Guard missions can be so incredibly healing. And I think the touchstone of that is a constant reminder of your capability and worthiness. And so we worked buoys in Alaska, in an area that you're familiar with. We did cool stuff. And it didn't start at first. It was a lot of baby steps. I think, their tragedy that they had experienced really affected the operations of the ship for quite some time, because the mishap happened with a piece of equipment that the ship actually needed to put the brow on because of the 25-foot tidal range that happens in homers. So even just getting the ship underway and tying the ship back up was a very, we had to treat that carefully. And then we had to do reps of it. And then we had to get back to buoys. And working buoys is a, very potentially dangerous mission. And it's very orchestrated and scripted to be as safe as possible. You're also in Alaska, where you don't necessarily have daylight. You don't necessarily have slack tide, and so I think just doing the ship's mission, I hope, was as healing for the crew as it was for me. Yeah, I just became their CO. I know when I walked across the brow and we did the thing that I was a CO, but they made me into a CO. It wasn't, and again, the foundation that Captain Newell gave me, and then the crew treating me with such care and love and, capability, that made me a CO. And it was incredible. And when I was nearing the end of that tour, I felt like, and I know for a fact, the whole Coast Guard was open to me. It was professionally an awesome time in my life because I had these cutter experiences. I had these civil engineering experiences. I had gotten to do a lot of cool stuff, and now I could go to headquarters. I could go to a base. I could go to another CEU or a facility unit and I could do all of these things. And so I threw my name in the hat for everything. And I got to screen for a bunch of stuff, and just for funsies, I threw my name in the hat for Mackinac. But I was coming off of a ship captain job, and there was no way that I was going to get to go to another one. So I was kind of getting excited for my phone call. I really thought I was going to get to go to EPM at headquarters. I was really hyped on that job, just to it was described to me as an awesome opportunity to give back to our incredible enlisted workforce. So I was stoked, and I got a call. And it was from the afloat detailer. And I was like, hey, what's up? I thought they were calling me about, my new ops or something like that. And he was like, no, this is about you. And I was like, what? And then I was like, oh no. And they offered me Mackinac. And I kind of skimmed over, but when Molly passed away, her first ship had been the original Mackinac. She learned how to drive a ship in Lake Huron, off Sheboygan, Michigan. And my family thought it would be really fitting to say goodbye to her on the new one. So we did, and it was incredible. So then when I get this call that I would get to go be with that crew on my first ship, and I would get my own opportunity to run into the breakwall in Grand Haven, Michigan. I just fell out my chair again. So I got to go do that. Yeah. So
what an incredible way to honor her.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yes. And that crew, it's not easy getting that ship underway from Sheboygan. It's really not. It's a big ship in a little waterway. They dropped everything to get us underway, to give my family that experience and that memory.
That story brings up three things. Number one, the underscoring this idea of everybody has a lot of things going on in their lives. That crew had been through a trauma. You had been through a trauma. We have hurricanes. We have COVID. And it is just always incredible because Coast Guard members just put on their hard hats and go to work. And that can get you through many, many, many difficult things. It is a way, if you serve, everyone here served during COVID,
yes.
right? The world stopped. Yeah. We just put on our masks and went to work.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful point about how that helped you get through. Second thing, I worked at EPM. It is a great place to work.
Amazing.
Sure, they would have loved to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then third, I know that you owned this, I went back-to-back CO tour thing, it was no problem, and you loved it. And I love that for you.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people might hear that and think, again, number one, those are 2-3-year CO tours.
Yeah.
And they might think you're crazy. So I am curious how you would respond to those people, or how, for you, it seemed like it was just breathing. Sure, I'll do this tour again. But was it like that, really?
I thought the crazier thing was that the detailers even let me do this. So I was like, if they're crazy enough, then I'm crazy enough. Let's go. And so, we all transfer a lot, and it's this constant having to relearn or readjust, and the opportunity to get to stay in a similar, and it was different, very different units, was such a cool thing, because I got to kind of keep learning right away. And I think many of us, the first year of anything, we're looking around and picking up the pattern and trying to learn. And then that second year, you feel like you can actually do your job. And I got 4 years where I felt, not every day, of course not, but it was this really cool thing. And in many ways, an addictive thing, I think, back to being part of a crew, be part of a crew again. Also, toward so orders in hand to Mackinac, my crew on Hickory experienced just a horrible tragedy when we lost our ensign, Teddy Frisk, to suicide. And as Teddy's CO, I absolutely felt like I failed him, which is hard to hear. I know that when someone dies by suicide, everybody around them feels like they failed. And I, in that moment, knew that I wasn't actually going to get to go to Mackinac. I knew that there was no way that they would trust me to be someone's captain again, considering what happened. And I know now that that's really sad for me to even say that, but that's what I thought at the time. Teddy died. We were in Sitka, away from our home port. Once we felt like we could safely return the ship home, we did. And then I was off to PCO school here in New London, Connecticut. And I was in this just foggy mindset, sitting at PCO school, one foot pointed toward the door because I just was anticipating a call. Why am I sitting in this class? And getting to be in the classroom with COs and XOs and Cuttermen, and they were who I needed to kind of start on that journey. I was absolutely still in the very deep depths of therapy and processing, and even still doing a lot of the things that you do, letters to kin. And because we were underway and all this, there was a delay in, the honors of Teddy and the things that you do when you lose someone. And it was just this like really rough time. And yeah, I just wasn't expecting to actually go to Sheboygan. Wasn't expecting. And then just somehow the days went by, and, said goodbye to that crew and went to Michigan and had a ceremony, and days pass. And I'm still very much in doubt. I'm still in many ways thinking that I shouldn't be the CO for this crew, that they deserve better. And just bit by bit, they did the same thing that Hickory did. They built me up, treated me like a captain, cried with me, told everybody I could about Teddy, because I wanted that crew to know that I would be the joy of a life to turn the ship around. If there was ever anything that they needed, if they or their family or anyone, Mackinaw's cool because your missions, you can say timeout most of the time. It's a slow ship, generally not responding, to those immediate urgent needs. I guess if search and rescue case happens and Mackinaw's coming for you, like something to be worried about, 14 knots. But icebreaking is awesome, booby tands is awesome. But generally you can say, timeout. And I told that crew and begged them, and now knowing what I had been through there, I think I'm hoping that gained some trust, that we could turn that ship around, we could get someone to shore at any moment. I know this is not a luxury that most Coast Guard cutters have, but we had it on Mackinac. And I do feel like we exercised that a lot with, someone's going to hospital or there's this emergency. We put people on the shore and got them back from shore all the time. And I think that was part of the healing up of losing a shipmate and regaining my confidence. Like the continued change of confidence as a CO over those 6 years was a journey. And maybe back to your question, was it crazy? Maybe. But I also feel like Coast Guard operations are an incredible privilege and can oftentimes be a break from the harsh realities of some of our support jobs where there isn't enough funding and there's not enough people. When you're on a ship, we were fully manned by EPM and OPM. Thank you. Shout out. This podcast is sponsored by EPM. We were full.
Not optimally, but fully.
Yeah, we had a full PAL. We were over PAL sometimes. It was awesome. And the ship, the ship can be quirky, but generally we enjoyed good operational time, minimal casualties, not the whole time, but most of the time could work the buoys we needed to, got to break some big ice, got to get some ships moving again. So it was a different, fresh environment from Hickory. I think every ship can afford that. I do think getting to go to land finally again has been really cool too, but I've had to relearn. How do you be home every weekend? How do you contribute to the household? It hasn't been, pretty. My husband's been so patient with me, like, when does the bus come? What do my kids eat? I'm dramatizing, but I will say, I don't think it was crazy to do 2 ships. I think it was awesome. I can't believe they let me do it. I know that it all depends on the candidate pool and how many people we have to go to cutters. And I got the adventure of a lifetime.
Wow.
Which brings you here.
Which brings me here.
I think you want to talk about this. The cadets, and she's your teacher.
Yes. So, I know when we talked a few days ago, you had said that your Mackinac trip, you thought it was a bookend. Same with your civil engineering. That could have been viewed as a bookend too. You started as a civil engineering major, then you started at Mackinac. You had the opportunity twice to leave. Yeah. And then now you're here at the academy, which is another bookend, like you said. So what was that decision? I know you have 2 sons. I'm sure they are so glad to have their mom back home more often.
No, they think I'm a dork.
So can you just take us through that process and, why you decided to come back here?
Yeah. So just hit 20 years back.
Congrats.
In May. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Could have retired off Mac and was definitely prepared for that possibility. My husband, I didn't tell you guys, back in grad school, it was before grad school, back in Juniper, met my husband in a bar in Rhode Island. Yep. So
what bar?
It was Perro Salado, and it's still there. Really good food. We actually went there not too long ago to just
with the boys.
That's so
we
cool.
did not take the boys, but we should. Yeah. But yeah, so here we are. Grady's 12, Sawyer is 8, and Eric is from Connecticut. Pretty much the whole time I've been dragging him around the country, making it quite difficult for him to really put some professional employment roots down. He has been doing engineering work for his dad's company. And so the plan was get back to Connecticut. We've been focused on my career this whole time. Let's now focus on his career and the family biz. So the plan was to come to Connecticut, and we kind of decided if I could be so lucky to get to do more Coast Guard, it should be here at the Coast Guard Academy, because that is a really good fit with the family.
Right.
Come to Knotsai, which is so cool because I get to see y'all slam boats into the pier, and it's so
Run
fun.
aground and lab.
Run around in lab, just it's all things that I've done in real life. Yeah, now that's out. So yeah, so this is like the cherry on the top. You guys being here with you, getting to interact with you and see you off on your Coast Guard adventure is just the coolest thing ever. And this is yet another dream job. So
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like a triple bookend. Because
Totally
you're back
is.
here, you started as a cadet here, you're back here, you're in nautical science, you're teaching, I think at some level here, at least at the LDC, they teach the Mackinac case study,
Yes, they do.
right?
They do.
When you were a cadet, do you remember who was like the department head nautical science? Do you remember being a cadet nautical science when you put in for this job? Did that play into the thought at all? Or how did you end up with that?
So the members of nautical science that have stuck into my brain and not gotten out are Mary Ellen Colella, who was, I think, the third class of women to come through the Coast Guard Academy. She was amazing. She made a big impression on me, and she shared some stories about what it was like to be a woman at the Coast Guard Academy in the early days, and just incredible stories from her. Still feel so grateful to her. I feel like those women made it possible for me to do all these shenanigans that I've told you guys with over the past 14 hours. But and then he was then Lieutenant Riley Gatewood, who was, I think, Douglas Monroe's last CO. But he was a prior enlisted yeoman who was in the nautical science department as a lieutenant. And he was no BS about, you got a memo due, your memo will be turned in, but your memo will be of quality. He did not mess around. And he also had tattoos, which I thought was crazy. I have those now too.
Look at
Sir,
you.
Mr. Gatewood, I have those now too. But he was awesome. And these were such big figures in my mind. I cannot imagine that I am one of them now. It does not compute. I'm like still a kid, in adult clothing. But so they were incredible. And I think about them a lot, and the fact that I am now them.
I love that. I think every active duty teacher here that puts on a uniform and teaches every day probably has a similar story about a professor, teacher, rotating military faculty especially, that made an impression on them, and that you think of when you're like, oh, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be like XYZ, right? Or I can have the same type of impact that person had. I think that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
You are one of them to us. You really
Thank
are.
you.
You're truly an inspiration to me, and I know you are for a lot of our classmates, and it's really an honor to be sitting here and doing our podcast with you. So I hope you know that.
Thank
really
you.
are.
I do. Thank you for saying that. And I hope so. I think that you guys have given me as much or more than I could ever give you. So I just want to give you the confidence that you have all of this ahead of you, and it's going to be amazing. Again, what an adventure. This family that we have is crazy. I didn't know that when I graduated. I was excited to go be on a boat. I didn't know that my classmates would show up to my sister's ICU room. I didn't know that y'all would be here, to cry with me when I tell you a story about losing a shipmate. Like I didn't know that. And this is the family that we have here. And I'm so grateful that I get to contribute in it, or maybe pay it back in any way that I can because of how much you guys have given me. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the way that you talk about family. It really is so amazing, the experiences that you have been through and the support that you've had. And I think another really important thing that I really value about you, and I know we've spoken about this a few times, and we're really excited to have you for the Cadet Advocates for Living Mindfully Wellness Dinner, because you're literally picture perfect for this. But I think what is so incredible is your vulnerability, and you're not afraid to say, I needed help and I got the help. And I wasn't okay, and that's okay.
Yes.
And I think that is so incredible to hear from a commander, to hear from a female in the military, to hear from a commanding officer, to show to us cadets who are going to be the future that it's okay to not be okay, and you're going to get through it, and it's not the end. So thank you so much for bringing that story to us.
You're welcome. And thank you for your endeavors to try to make sure that people know that it's actually the most logical thing to do to
Right.
get help. It is the most, you are functioning as a human if you're not okay after some of these things, and
Right.
you deserve the help and welcome.
Right.
We are all out here. We all have our experiences. I know we blathered on about mine today. I think you guys are going to get a lot of other great perspectives and experiences on your podcast. But there's so many of us out here that are open arms about, all of these really tough subjects.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there could have been a better guest for episode 1 for us. And so we really want to thank you for spending your time and sharing with us. And especially thank you for not being an old cutterman and asking me why I'm not back afloat.
Once we cut camera, I'm going to do that.
We'll get that off camera. No answer, sir.
Well, Commander Greene, thank you so much for your honesty, your vulnerability, and your leadership. Your heart and your story has truly made an impact on my heart, and I know it will for all of our listeners. So thank you. You're an inspiration to me, and I'm so honored to have you here as a leader that we can all look up to.
You're welcome, and thank you back for having me.
Of course.
That was our amazing conversation for today. Thanks for spending time with us in Studio 1887 in the Alumni Center here at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. Core Conversations is about connection, connecting cadets with alumni, connecting experiences across generations, and connecting the moments that shape who we become as leaders. Before we close out, we want to take a minute to thank our alumni community for their stories, their perspective, and their continued engagement. You are what keep this community strong and thriving. Please stick around for another few minutes to hear directly from a cadet about what that impact looks like in action. It's time for the Alumni Impact Interlude. In 2024, the Alumni Association dedicated a new wellness room in Chase Hall, and I'm here with First Class Aislinn Murray, president and founder of Calm, a cadet club focused on mindfulness. Aislinn, talk me through Calm and why you started it.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having us here and for giving me this opportunity to talk about Calm and how much we've been able to do because of the Alumni Association and everything you guys have done for us. So first, I'm Aislinn Murray. I am the founder and co-president of Calm, which stands for Cadet Advocates for Living Mindfully. So as you said, in 2024, the Wellness Room was created, and in 2024, Calm was also created. So
Awesome.
Calm was created. At that point, there was a lot of talk about sexual assault prevention in our cadet careers, and there was not a lot of talk about what happens after someone experiences a significant trauma like that, and what are those resources, and what is this support that we can help for those survivors. And that's where the idea of Calm came from. We wanted to have those conversations. We wanted to create that intentional community. And then we quickly decided, you know what, there are more things that can happen to cadets than just sexual assault, and there's more trauma that they can experience. So we decided to open it up to everything and really just create this platform for people to identify, these are tools that I can use when I experience a significant challenge or I'm overcoming something. And that's exactly what Calm is all about. It's about having those open conversations about trauma-informed leadership. We have over 400 cadets in Calm, which is huge. We have over 100 cadets attending almost every single Calm event that we do. It's about reducing those stigmas around mental health and really just bringing that topic of conversation around this cadet community and the Corps to make us all better and stronger.
It's amazing. And I think obviously the Coast Guard in general, are first responders to a lot of crises. And so I could imagine that these skills are highly transferable to the fleet. I mean, you'll be working insane schedules and you will be undergoing all sorts of stress that you probably can't anticipate right now, but you've got this toolkit and you're helping cadets prepare for it. So Aislinn, I think it's amazing. And I know the Alumni Association is very enthusiastic in supporting Calm. And also, I do want to shout out to the classes of 2004 and 1984 and Lockheed Martin for providing the funding for the Wellness Room. Talk me through how the Wellness Room became an area and a space that you guys needed.
Absolutely. So similar to the way that Calm was started, there was this talk around sexual assault prevention and not as much talk about recovery for those survivors that have experienced it. And that's where the idea of a wellness room came in. So where the wellness room in Chase Hall is right now was like an empty room. Supposedly it used to be a firstie lounge from hearing alumni stories,
But for the past few years since I've been here, it has been nothing. It's been completely empty. And so we brought this up to the Alumni Association, and we talked about how there's not a space for cadets to have a private space to have a conversation. And that's where this idea came into mind. So any cadets that wanted to call an SVC, call a victim advocate, call home when they were experiencing something significant, there wasn't a space to do that, especially with the construction going on in Chase Hall right now, and day rooms that were former rooms that we could all hang out in. They had a couch, a TV, things like that. Those are really no longer here. There's a few left, but not every company has one. So that was where this initial idea came from. And the Alumni Association was like, absolutely, what do you guys need? Let's make it happen. And that idea, similar to Calm, branched into let's make this open for everyone. So as you said, the line of work that we are joining, we are going to be faced with so many challenges, not just trauma, but even just having a bad day and learning how to overcome any of those experiences. Wellness looks different for everyone. So the wellness room has now been a place that is essentially like day room 2.0, but really emphasizing the fact that fill up your toolkit with everything that you can get as a cadet to overcome these challenges. So now we have hosted, especially Calm. Calm has hosted a ton of events in the wellness room. We've been able to host different yoga sessions, different meetings, lunch excusals to talk about different topics. And then other clubs have also been able to use it. The wellness room is fully booked all the time.
And for those who are listening, we'll try to post up some pictures for anyone watching the video. But the space is like much larger than your average day room. It's large, so you can hold like a large yoga class in there. You could probably have a couple of activities going on because it seems like it's a big room.
Absolutely.
And you have a privacy booth too, which is also really cool. I think alums who are listening wouldn't, who maybe haven't been here in a while, don't even know that those exist.
Absolutely. Yeah. Many cadets didn't even know they exist. It came from the original intent of creating a safe space for people to call home to get help, to call their resources and their support system. And it is now transformed into people doing their homework. They just need a really quiet place to go, and they'll go into the sound booth. It's awesome. I love the sound booth.
And the fourth class have used it to study for INDOC.
Yes.
And there's been Super Bowl parties. There's just, again, like you said, wellness looks different for everyone. So I think the fact that this is a space that the entire Corps is utilizing to do what wellness means for them, I think is really amazing.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important, especially with the 50 years of women, when we had a lot of those women come back. I think it's so healing for a lot of them and so important for us to have this wellness, resilience, mental health discussion at the forefront. I think it's so important to break the stigma. And by having a room dedicated to taking care of yourself, dedicated to filling up your cup when things are going wrong, it's so important, and it's going to make us all better leaders in the long run.
Certainly more resilient, for sure. I would say when we were taking the tour of Chase Hall, we passed a billboard, and I was with some of those early women from the 80s, and we passed a billboard that was about essentially like wellness. And I don't know if this is like a Calm sponsored one, but it was like, here are like 5 things you can do to like get yourself right again. Go for a walk, be in nature, meditate. And they were all taking pictures of it. I think just amazed that there's been this shift in this focus on it's okay to take a second to do what you need to do to get right again. And the fact that you guys are providing resources. Most people, if you don't dig into it, you don't know necessarily how to make yourself right again. So
absolutely, yeah. It's a need, it's a want, and it's something that's making our community so much stronger. So thank you to everything that you guys do for us.
And thank you, Aislinn, for starting Calm. It's really impressive, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in the fleet, and best of luck.
Thank you.
The impact your alumni association is having around the Academy is inspiring. That impact is made possible through the support of our members. Membership in your alumni association matters. It empowers connections between our alumni and the Academy to develop thriving and enduring relationships, and it helps support state-of-the-art and margin of excellence enhancements for the Corps of Cadets. Membership also comes with some pretty cool benefits, like access to professional development, unique connection opportunities to grow your network, discounts when welcoming back the whole family for homecoming, and so much more. Your membership even supports projects like this podcast. So stay connected and ensure that your ties to the Long Blue Line remain strong. Become a member today at cgaalumni.org/1887. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with your network so these stories can continue to reach and connect our community. Until next time.